Okay, so I'm going to start from my biased point of view. English language and culture. This is probably a bit not only English center, but London centric. But yeah, when we talk about English and culture, what do you think of? What does it bring to mind for either of you? Is it anything to do with these pictures or something else? What's the first thing that jumps into your mind? Andreas, perhaps we'll start with you. You were here first.
Yeah,
maybe Brexit it comes to mind or something.
yeah, the picture. I mean, there are probably of every country there are some stereotypes or some pictures you think first of if you think of this country.
Right.
I really started thinking while I was reading the recommended articles, because previously I didn't think language and culture is connected so much, especially when we talk about a quite over-regional language like English. But there were a lot of arguments in the article, and of course, if we go deeper into a language and try to read and understand between the lines more than a network of words which are connected, there are phrasal verbs and idioms, and probably I tend to agree that you have to go deeper into a language and into culture to make conversation to a native English speaker.
Yes, we're definitely going to come back to that. We're going to look at it more detailed. I just thought I tried to start off with this kind of superficial topic at the beginning. What does it conjure up immediately if you think of English language and culture? Obviously, if you do a search for English culture, you get different articles, and then either American culture or other English language speaking cultures. But I want to get your first impressions first of all before we get a bit deeper into culture and language.
I would say, when somebody say what is the culture and the language, I always think that I use language because I want to communicate and I want to have some agreement with somebody. And when it's a different culture, then I always try to confirm assumptions, because the culture creates a lot of assumptions, and these assumptions are not expressed because we want to focus on the main topic, and there are plenty of assumptions which are behind, and then some misunderstanding can occur because these assumptions are different on both sides. So if I want to be 100% sure with somebody that we understand each other, then I try to express as many assumptions as possible and confirm them that we have the same assumptions, and then the agreement or the deal, it's more reliable, or I can more believe that things will happen as I think that they will happen.
Yeah, I think
So
that's a very good point. Yes, sorry, you wanted to.
So for me, it's about the confirmation of assumptions. Anytime when I feel that there are some different cultures as a background.
Okay, thanks, Rado. Yes, I did think about when we had a chat the other day. You said you understood exactly what was said, but you want to make sure what will happen going forward from the meeting. So you've expressed that nicely. Hello, Natalia. Welcome.
Hi.
How are you doing? Did you catch what's going on here? Can you jump in?
Yes, I got it. And thank you for this topic. It's a really great topic for discussion, and I think it's really main. So of course it's a big connection, culture and the language. And we're talking about English because we are interested to improve our language skills. But for me, I just remember that my first impression about English was my big desire to sing English songs. So the English was the second language, the second foreign language for me. The first one was German, and for me it was really easier to study the second language. The grammar was easy. I think the German grammar is really wow. It's of course more difficult, and it was easier for me to study the second language. But anyway, my first point was to start to sing English songs, and I just really succeeded, and I had a lot of karaoke CDs, and I was singing at home. I know a lot of English songs I can sing, and just like for myself only. But anyway, I was so happy that I could achieve it, and then while I was studying, it was of course difficult because sometimes you see, for example, it was difficult to listen to it. Because, for example, you can read the text and you can understand it because, for example, all words you know all words. But if this text you would listen to it, yes, and so sometimes for me it was difficult to understand why. Maybe I'm really that was my first shock about listening, and then I just practice, and of course practice makes perfect. And so just after 3 years I was not just like fluent, but I was confident. I could speak. I try to speak as much as I can. I try to speak with my colleagues even. I try to find kind of a lot of people who can speak, who can interact. So that's my experience, and I know that it's kind of like part of me, and I can really imagine just living without English now because of work, because of traveling, because of that. I'm interested, and now just I'm curious about something different, and because our culture is it's not the same, and so sometimes when you find out some facts and some kind of maybe similarities, it's also interesting for me. That's my point.
Yeah, it strikes me that everybody probably has this opinion or view of other cultures, maybe stereotypes, but once you start to learn the language, then you, I think, really start to get a better understanding for that culture. Okay, let me move on to the next one then. Is it really necessary? Is it essential to understand the culture in order to learn the language? We've touched on this already. I know these questions kind of overlap, but let's keep the discussion going. Any other points that you guys can think of?
I would say when you want to be on the professional, really high level, then it's necessary. But when you want to use language as a tool to communicate, to find a way to the hotel or this kind of communication, then it's not really necessary. And also it's the different situation now than was 100 years ago, because now, because of social media and all this globalization, we are getting slowly, but we are getting the same. I have the feeling that because we consume the same media, the same media and the same content, and it's shaped us, and we are converting to one universal person, which is
Right.
more or less the
We're all
same.
becoming the same.
Yeah, which is more or less the same in the whole world. We are at the beginning of this process, but if when you travel and you go somewhere and you find the same shop or McDonald's everywhere, and it shapes you, and it has a influence on everyday life, and then the product is one universal person, and with the same opinion or with the same behavior. So I have feelings that we are getting, because of this globalization, we understand each other more and more, and we understand the cultures differences, and these differences are getting smaller and smaller. So
Yeah,
if
that's
you
a
want
good
to
point.
be if you want to be like a really professional, and you need to recognize what is not said in the sentences, what is behind, then you have to be very good in a culture of the other country. But for common discussion and for more common situation, it's not really necessary.
Okay, thank you, Rado. Yeah, I think you've brought up another good question that we might come back to. Are we losing our cultural identities? But maybe we'll come back to that later. Can I stay on this question for now with you two?
Yeah, the confusing aspect for me about this question is that right now we are experiencing different languages. We get to know each other, and I mean cultures. We are experiencing different cultures. We get to know each other, other cultures, but connected via English. So English is a means of getting to know other cultures. So the question, is it necessary to know the English culture to get to know each other? Don't know if you know what I mean, but is English something like a commitment to a basis culture, because there's some rules in English and so connected to the English language. So everybody who uses this language commits to these basic rules and cultural aspects.
Yes, so it's a kind of conduit, or yes, it's the method. And English perhaps is, I think English is definitely changing in itself and in its role as more and more as a global language. It's I've read people talk about now it doesn't belong to the English or the Americans, and it's become everybody's language. Everybody uses it in their own way.
Maybe English is not the best example or the easiest example to examine this question, because
not.
English is so over-regional.
Yes, good points. Natalia, what do you think about that?
I think it's impossible to study language without culture, and I think the culture is kind of like a context. It's more interesting to know about culture and about history and watch movies and know about cuisine. It's kind of like entertaining part while you're studying. Of course, it's possible just to avoid this part, but I think in this case it will be so robotic and so boring, because sometimes, of course, you have to memorize grammar. You have to push yourself to do something, and because it's study, it's a process, and so you have to. It's not like you're just not playing games or just it's not the same. So you have to push your brain to work. So you can make this process more entertaining, and I think that culture is also a really good point and good part just to know more and to have to find out some interesting facts about history, about everything. So just wow, you can compare it with your culture, and so the process will be more interesting. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about it.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Let's move on. And again, you know, we might repeat ourselves, but language and culture, are they inextricably linked? Can you have one without another? Can you have a language without a culture, or the other way around? We're getting a bit more, I don't know, deeper or more philosophical or technical.
There was a good explanation in the first article, to my mind,
Yes.
where it said culture is the characteristics of thoughts and thought patterns of people or groups, and everybody has his own culture.
Mm-hmm.
No culture is 100% the same, because I have personal thoughts that differ from others, and in turn language is shaped by culture.
Mm-hmm.
So we need language to express our thoughts, and in turn the language is shaped by culture. So it's inextricably connected.
Yes. Right. It was a good article, I thought, explained. Certainly they argued the point quite well, that really you can't have one without the other. Do you guys agree? Or
Definitely, I agree. Language reflects the culture or the way of thinking or the behavior. If the language is rich in some area, it means that people habits or behavior is rich in this area, or their these people are focused on this area, and that's the reason why they have plenty of different names more or less for the one thing, but they recognize a lot of differences, and it's really shows you how people behave or what is important for them, because it has a rich vocabulary of the area.
yes, it reminds me of one fact, and I'm not sure if it's true, but it probably is, that the Inuit people or Eskimos have about 7 different words for the, for snow. And so when you said about this, I think it's a very good point. And in many societies, yes, you guys go.
Sorry, so I would also provide an example about proverbs. So just how we can understand these proverbs, idioms, without studying culture, without just find out why is just to try to find this logical way, because that's it's kind of like history point or some. Of course, it's culture context, just to understand these idioms and proverbs. Of course, we can avoid them, but anyway, just just like an apple a day will be a doctor away, just kind of like that. It's that these expressions make our speech, make our speech more beautiful.
Definitely, they enrich the language, don't they? I always find it interesting when different languages have the same idioms or similar, or sometimes completely different ones, which just
What I want to add is that it happens also in small small range when you have some community, for example, a game player which are focused around one game. They develop their own language and nobody understands what this word means, but this community fully understand what is it about. And this happen in small community and maybe faster like in a general population. But this is the example that they have a lot of different words about one topic and they recognize differences and they create their own language because they focus on one things or one. They have common point of interest, and around this point of interest, they build new vocabulary, and this happens very fast and in small group of people. But it happens also on the nation level or on the society. So this is the example of how culture or the activity, the language reflect the activity or the culture or the focus of people.
Thanks, Rado. Nice, good point. It made me think of one of the articles mentioned about that language, of course, is always changing from generation to generation, and the young people and teenagers, we're always good at coming up with new words. I say we were when I was a teenager, and teenagers of today obviously still are. Yeah. Andreas, what's...
I just had wanted to add the example of the youth. We sometimes it's difficult to understand our children, or if children talk to each other, because they use different meanings or invent new words, and it's really not possible to understand sometimes.
Yeah, and isn't that the idea often? It's
to sound cool and to be not understood from the parents, maybe.
Yes, this kind of cool gang, and it shows who's in the cool group and who is not in, who is outside. Okay.
Now, I think that people are really influential for the language. So I don't remember this word particular, how that's influenced. But anyways, for example, we use Google. So now just we have this word, the verb to Google. Yes, it's a new word. And so also there are many examples. So just people brought these words to the language.
Right, yeah.
We make it and we create the language.
It reflects the behavior, doesn't it? Like the selfie as well. Wasn't really
Yes.
It wasn't a word when I was younger. Such a thing as a selfie. Yeah.
It also happens, it reminds me when somebody is abroad for a long time, and I have an example. My colleague told me that he has family in New Zealand, and this family has a kid or have children, and they came to Czech Republic, and they speak very well Czech, and they were visiting Prague and walking around, and they wanted to buy cola light, and they searching they were unsure how to say light in Czech language, because when they born it didn't exist, or it's something new what is not translated directly to the Czech language, and they were not able how to ask in the shops that they want to buy cola light. And when they return, they explain this issue, and then they say we want cola light, so they didn't translate it, they keep it in English and ask parents how to say this correctly in Czech, And the answer is we do not translate it. We use it light. So this is example when you lost connection with the society, with cultures, and you do not absorb these new things, this evolution of the language.
Yes. Okay. Another similar question, if you like, does cultural background make language learning easier? I think this is a big overlap again, but on the last point, it made me think as well of something you mentioned about being disconnected. It reminded me of when countries share a language, and maybe, for example, the US and the UK, and they diverge. Sometimes it's the older words which live on in the new country, if you like. I think not so much of America because they distance themselves, but maybe in French-speaking Canada, they have a lot of old words that French people don't use anymore. I think the same sometimes in India, they use some slightly dated English because they've taken the English from the colonial days of the British Empire. But yes, I'm rambling on. What do you guys think? Any new points?
It's easier, and also as mentioned, entertaining. It's interesting when you just knowing something more just about. I can give you an example. Give examples like movies or literature, and when you can read original books and original literature, and watch movies and watch videos, and of course this time your the process could become more interesting and more. It's not like now you're pushing yourself, just you have a book, a study book, and that's it. So you have a lot of resources, and you can watch a video, you can watch a movie, and at once you can improve your skills, you can learn new words, you can find new expressions, and so on. And while you're watching interesting movie with just exciting plot, and so why not? It's easier, maybe it's more effective just to have so many tools, culture tools.
I definitely encourage that kind of activity. I think you're right. If you're interested in the subject matter, it makes a huge difference. You're far more likely to persist.
And I think it's also a reason why it's very useful to go abroad to learn a language, to stay in another country, the target language country for a while, because not only you expose yourself to the language, but also because it gets in a way ingrained into you when you get to know the culture and how people of the country use it, and if you really get to know them, I think it's much more effective and efficient than to study only by reading textbooks also.
Yes, for sure. We have this term immersion. You can immerse yourself in the language or in the culture, and it's such an effective way to learn. You have all these connections when you learn some new words. You're surrounded by. It reminds me of one podcast I listened to. A guy saying he was learning Portuguese, and suddenly, when he was on a bus and a mother shouted at a child and said in Portuguese, "Don't do this," using the imperative form, he suddenly, oh, that's how you use the imperative. I get it now. And you can always think back to this time, so it really sticks.
And I would like to ask you a question about mistakes. So just you having a lot of students from different cultures, so different backgrounds, and do we make the same mistakes, or just our mistakes are different because, for example, I know about Russian that we don't have any articles in our language. So of course, sometimes we skip it. And of course, there is our common mistake, I think. And so how about other cultures and other students?
That's a
we
great
make the same
question.
mistakes?
Yes, the short answer is no. People don't make the same mistakes. It depends where you come from. There are sometimes similarities depending on the languages. Like you mentioned, if another language doesn't use these articles, perhaps the Slovak languages, I'm sure don't have articles. But yeah, there are definitely patterns, but people tend to make different mistakes. Maybe there is a sound that doesn't exist in your own language, which makes it extra difficult. Whereas for other learners, that's not difficult at all. But they will struggle with another thing. So yes.
We had a discussion about this name of the month that
Yes.
for Asia people, it's something what is really difficult, but for people in Europe, usually January, February is something what is really similar to their own language, and it's the easiest part of the language for them. So.
Definitely, there's that cultural reference. Sometimes you have similar words as well. German and English, there are a lot of words which at least appear similar, and French and other languages as well. When you get to some languages, Asian languages particularly, they seem completely different.
There is a German language which is commonly used in Czech Republic, and it's a Schwindel. And when somebody said that this is also in English and I should learn this word, I said, okay, this one I know. This is easy for me.
But is it swindle in the English language to kind of trick someone? A kind of fraud, a con? Is that what you mean?
German English translation is swindle, yes.
Okay, yes. A good word. Yes. Nice. Okay, let's come on turn to this old question. It's kind of I quite like this picture.
I think that the language was first, because if it's just me, it's my just I'm thinking about that because so just first language was like a writing language that people they just painted and they left some pictures and caves, and so there were some symbols and pictures. It was kind of a language. Language is a way of communication, and I think it was like in our physical necessity just to communicate, to live something and to say something. And so I think that writing language was first kind of writing, because there was the language was gestures and just like sounds, and people of course they try to communicate. I don't know, but talking about culture, that's maybe culture of our humanity, that just we are humans, and so just we are not animals, and just so we became different. Maybe that made us people. I mean, just our activities, how we live, and so maybe culture was first anyway. But I think it's really controversial question.
Yeah, the question is, from what point do we talk about language? What sounds make a language being a language? And I think even if people or creatures even had just one word or 10 words, they would behave in a certain way, and they would establish rules how to behave. And then the question, from point do we talk about culture? But yeah, it's very, very close, in my opinion.
Yes, right. How do we define either one? So yeah, you guys, I don't know if you have any other questions relating to this topic.
For me, it's still an interesting question. To what extent my conversation partner should be aware of the language culture as well, and it might make it difficult in some situations. If, for example, I'm aware of idioms and I use them very naturally. I would like to, I don't, but if and my communication partner doesn't, so it's only a way to do quite a shallow conversation, but there might be a gap or a barrier if one part is more aware of these deeper meanings of the language. And so I ask myself, when should I use some of these idioms? Do I have to make sure that my conversation partner is aware of them as well, or might there occur misunderstandings when I use them? Especially when I'm not in the UK or at a place where English is a native language.
Very good question. Yes, I think it's like when you're having a conversation with anybody, you need to gauge the level of the other person and try to reach some kind of, level that you can both communicate on. Rado, did you had something?
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good point. I have experienced that one teacher tried to learn me a lot of these words like meeting is called off and not meeting is cancelled, and I explained him that I don't have to. It's not possible to use all these words in my environment because there are plenty of people with some basic English, and if I add these words to my speech, then they will be completely lost, and this is also the reason why I don't know these words and don't use them, because it's like a filter. It's not possible to use it when the environment is that for everybody the language is English is the second language. So I try to avoid of these words, and it has effects that I don't use it and I don't know them.